done and how interesting it is. It's funny, I turned this on, I pointed at me, and it goes, no, I'm not going to watch you. Let's see. Now I'm there. All right. Silly. Didn't like that. Oh. Pardon?
Is that the Osmo? DJI Osmo?
DJI. Is it awesome? I don't know if it was called. This is an old one, so I don't know if it was called that then. But now, why is it giving me recenter? No. Okay. I don't know if these are useful either. That's just I've gotten used to recording myself years ago. I think it's funny you could just dump all this stuff on YouTube for free. And looking at what AI has gobbled up from the internet, I realized that they've taken millions of YouTube videos, transcribed them, and then included that in their database. And it occurred to me, hey, some of me might have been. So that's fun. However, okay. So the quiz question I had asked, I realize I must be confusing people on that too. Was, can you give a true sentence? But a lot of people have already given me the response to the second quiz question, how do you raise a child? That's really what we should be talking about today.
Yeah.
Yes?
I thought I missed one last week because I did the sentence one. I did not do the child one.
Well, the trouble is, even though we're going 2 classes at a time for a week, we had that holiday, which kind of pushed the second class of each week off to the next week. So that's part of why it's confusing. So, and you're not late. I don't, I take everybody's quiz responses, and at the end of the semester, I put them all on a flash drive and weigh it to see if it weighs less.
Right.
I have a really micro, measurement device. I think that's just fun. No, this is your course. You're paying for it. If you don't, it's like if you bought pizza and they give you the box and you said thanks, and then you left without it. What sense does that make? You take the pizza, you want to eat the pizza. At least give the dogs a little bit of the crust or something, however you eat pizza. Even Eleanor needs the pizza. That's, I'm sure, part of what Eleanor did. Should I mention Eleanor in class?
Eleanor, but yeah, that's fine.
Just so you know, there's another student in the class that isn't enrolled, but there's nothing you could do about FERPA with that one, right? Oh well. And I'm jealous. All my children, we had to adopt them. Pay money for them and sign the adoption. Donna and I could not figure out how to make them. And theoretically, it's supposed to come pretty naturally. I guess you've heard about that. I even read, the Christian Guide to Marital Sex. I mean, it was in the restricted section. When I took it down off the shelf, it went, "Rrrr!" However, Father Meyer was right. That's how it's done. Can't believe it, but
Who was the author?
I didn't even pay attention to it at the time. Big book though, and it had pictures, drawings, of course. That's However, That's the way that goes. Anybody ever see the Monty Python, The Meaning of Life? Where the Protestants are sitting there at the window looking at the Catholics going by. Well, actually, that applies. That does apply to what we're talking about today. But it's also, I'd probably have to give you a trigger warning if I were going to show that, because any of the Monty Python deserves a trigger warning. It wouldn't be Monty Python without it. Okay. I was going to start off by talking about the true sentence question. So, it's pretty easy. Some folks, I think, went because of the traditional square suggestion, went and made it much more difficult than it was. Because, in fact, some folks gave me an argument, a whole argument, as opposed to a true statement. So gave me two premises and a conclusion, all of which were true, usually, right? So that was pretty good. Nobody gave me a sentence that I could. Now wait a minute. They all looked pretty basic, so that's easy. But the response I like to send back is, well, the thing is, in the media today, when you listen to people arguing with one another, an awful lot of people clearly don't understand what a true or false statement is, because they get mad as heck at other people and say they're lying. And if you're not familiar with lying, this is when someone knows something and deliberately tells you something else to mislead you. So I had a friend who Friday I found out had received a check from the Publishers Clearinghouse. She had won $9,000, and she apparently deposited the check, and I guess she started to use the money for something, and then discovered that the check was fake. That was a scam. And now apparently she believes she owes $9,000 to all those that she used the money for. And the trouble, of course, she doesn't have it. She's just on her Social Security. And she also works for the school bus system. She monitors some buses, full time, I think, or however that works. But in any case, they lied to her. They told her this is a check that you could deposit, and it was totally a lie. But we have a problem with a lot of people who disagree over opinions, right? That's a lot of people feel something is good. If I say this is a water cup or a thermos, or I guess about 5 or 6 different possible categories I could throw this in, right? And we would all agree, because we're all fluent speakers of the language, that is a true statement, right? But what if I say this is a good cup? Is that true or false? It's an opinion. In fact, I would argue it's a terrible cup. The lid doesn't work, right?
I agree.
Actually, I had the lid open at the moment, but but it would have done that. Okay, now it's closed. Let's see. See, it's still there. It's terrible. But even that's not true or false. It's an opinion. And we can have opinions about the same topic, but it would be wrong, I think, to call someone a liar for having a different opinion. And the trouble with that, of course, is when you call somebody a liar, you're besmirching, is that a good word? You're besmirching their honor, right? It's an insult to call them a liar. And politicians do this all the time. And it's embarrassing because, well, if you have Logic 101 or even just Philosophy 201, you should know that, well, wait a minute, that's an opinion, so it's neither true nor false. And all value statements today are considered, as it's called the boo hooray theory. This is actually kind of funny, I think. So the argument that things that you express emotional attitudes, or like saying murder is wrong. That's equivalent to saying boo for murder. I mean, I think most of us would want to say that murder is wrong is true, but we have to check ourselves, I think, and realize that even that statement, and we even argue over whether it's a statement, because there are some folks like Karl Popper that would argue that murder is wrong is a non-cognitive statement. That's what they call it. And what do they mean by that? It's not a verifiable truth. You can't scientifically verify it. So that's kind of intriguing. So there's an awful lot of statements that we make that are matters of opinion. In fact, the problem with Karl Popper is that his opinion that any statement that is not verifiable, is neither true nor false, is not verifiable. Haha, that's funny. No, it's not funny. It's funny that Karl Popper is making the same error that he's complaining about in other people. So it's paradoxical. But, so we have an attitude problem today about how many statements can be true or false. So instead, they're opinion questions. And opinions, everybody has opinions, I suppose. At least that's my opinion. I hope they have opinions. Right? But at the same time, it's not the kind of thing that a scientist could sit down. What we do is with sociology, sociologists will go out and poll people, right? Like one of my favorites is they'll go around and they'll ask people, are you in the middle class? And famously, most Americans will all say, yes, I'm in the middle class, no matter whether they're living in a trailer or a mansion. We like thinking that Americans equal middle class, right? That's just, but how do you determine what the middle class is, whatever that is? And is the middle class going away? That's a whole nother thing. Okay, so we can talk lots about that, but we have to move on to Aristotle. If I look at the syllabus, I didn't even pull it up yet. Today's the 15th, am I right? Yes, what luck. And so we're looking at a second important part of Aristotle, and that's his ethics, the Nicomachean Ethics. By the way, the question, if you saw it, who was Nicomachus? That was kind of in there in my notes somewhere.
Which one?
Pardon?
What's Nicomachus?
Who was, which Nicomachus? Yeah, because apparently Aristotle's father was named Nicomachus, and he named his son Nicomachus. And then if you look in Wikipedia, what you discover is there's a Nicomachus who's a couple hundred years later. He's a famous mathematician. So when I ask that question, a lot of people right away say that, well, the Nicomachean Ethics was named in honor of Nicomachus, the mathematician, which was 200 years after Aristotle. No, it's that's clearly wrong. So the real puzzle is, well, was he naming it in honor of his father, or his son, or both? Well, we'll never know. So it's another one of those questions. Just hopefully the questions I ask you are not the kind of question that you could get wrong. They're all opinion questions. Even when you decide what a true statement is, that's still, you can still argue over that, I think.